Have you ever watched a day unravel so completely that, when the sun finally sets, you realize you don't know where the world ended and your own grief began? It was September 12th, the kind of early autumn afternoon that smells like cooling pavement warmed by a reluctant sun, summer clinging to the edges of fall. The sky held a soft gray promise of rain, but the air was still, heavy with the quietness that wraps around a town just before something shifts, something breaks. I was standing on the cracked concrete porch of the little blue house at the end of Maple Street, the one with peeling paint and the rusty mailbox that never quite closed right. My hands were jammed deep into the pockets of a worn-out hoodie, and my eyes kept drifting down the street, hoping for a sign, any sign, that he'd come back. My brother, Nate. Nate had been gone for exactly 12 hours when my cat, Luna, disappeared. The day had started just like any other, except it wasn't, because Nate didn't come home. That morning, the sun spilled in, golden across the cracked linoleum floors of our kitchen as I sat at the table with a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring blankly at the steaming swirl in my mug. I could still hear the faint clatter of Nate's old skateboard against the pavement from the night before, his last trace before he vanished without a word. No notes, no calls, just a silence so thick it filled every room. I felt it before I saw it. The silence wasn't just empty, it was a kind of waiting, like holding your breath underwater, hoping the surface is just inches away, but knowing it might never come. Luna was curled in the corner of the kitchen, a small, pale calico with bright, almost greenish eyes that caught the light in a way that made them look almost alive when the room was dark. She had come to me the week after Nate left, an unspoken truce in a house that had started to feel too big and too empty all at once. Luna wasn't just a cat. She was a quiet anchor. Her fur was patchy in places, a subtle scar on her left shoulder where I guess life hadn't been kind before she found me. That scar always made her look like she carried a secret, one she never planned to share. She had the slowest blink I'd ever seen in a cat, that soft, trusting close of eyes that feels like permission, like a tiny, fragile bond being formed between two beings who didn't quite know how to be whole on their own. When I noticed her gone, the house felt even colder. I remember the way the light shifted just then, the golden afternoon dimming, shadows creeping along the hallway walls like quiet fingers. I moved slowly, my heart a hollow echo. The room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that's almost loud. The smell of rain was starting to creep in through the cracked window, mixing with the faint scent of old wood and stale air. Luna was nowhere. No soft pads on the floor, no gentle purr from the bedroom. Nothing. I called her name in that low, rough voice you use when you're not sure if the person, or in this case the animal, will ever answer. Luna. No response. Just the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower and the creak of an old swing on a rusty chain. I thought maybe she slipped outside, like she sometimes did. But the front door was closed, the screen door latched, the garden gate still hanging on its hinges. There was no sign she'd gone anywhere. No fur by the door, no scent on the porch, and that was when the knot in my stomach grew tight enough to cut off my breath. I went outside, step by hesitant step, tracing the worn path Nate and I had walked together years ago when we were kids. The cracked sidewalks, the rusted bike rack by the corner store, the faded stop sign smeared with peeling stickers. The air smelled like the first hint of rain on dry earth, and there was a chill settling into the bones of the neighborhood, as if the world was holding its breath with me. I called Luna again, my voice breaking, cracking. "Luna, come on, girl." The cat that had become my only steady presence through this chaos was gone. It wasn't just that she disappeared, it was the timing. The same day Nate vanished, Luna vanished. I remember standing in the middle of the cracked street, rain beginning to fall in slow, heavy drops, and feeling like I was losing two parts of myself at once. Inside, the house felt impossibly empty. The couch where Luna used to curl up in a sunbeam was bare. The kitchen chair where she loved to sit and watch me while I cooked was empty. The faint smell of her fur still clung to the edge of my jacket pocket. I sank to my knees, rain soaking through my clothes, and for a long moment, I just let the silence swallow me whole. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the start of everything changing. The start of a journey that would unravel the quiet fabric of my life and weave a new story, one stitched together by loss, hope, and the fragile threads of unexpected connection. Because Luna wasn't just missing, and Nate wasn't just gone. There was something beneath the surface, something I couldn't see yet, that tied them both together. I wish I could say I was brave, but I wasn't. I was scared. I walked back inside the house, dripping wet and hollow, and I looked at the old photo on the mantel, a picture of Nate and me from better days. He was laughing, arms thrown wide, with that reckless grin I remembered so well. I traced the edges of the frame with trembling fingers, my mind spinning with questions I had no answers to. And then, I heard it. A faint sound coming from the hallway, soft, tentative, almost like a whisper. I froze. It wasn't Luna, not exactly. It was something else. The slow, steady tapping of claws on the wall. At first I thought it was my imagination. But the sound came again, persistent, rhythmic, almost like a message. I turned, heart pounding, eyes searching the shadows, and in that quiet moment, the weight of everything I'd lost settled around me like a second skin. The day Nate went missing, Luna disappeared, and now, the house was trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear. That was the beginning, the moment the ordinary cracked open, revealing something fragile and raw beneath, something waiting. The morning after Luna vanished, I woke to a silence so thick it pressed against my ears, making the world feel far away and unreal. I blinked against the gray light filtering through the threadbare curtains and lay still, letting the quiet wrap around me like a shroud. It was the kind of silence that fills a room when someone has left it too long. It was absence made tangible. I wasn't sure how long I stayed in bed, tangled beneath the thin blanket, the faint hum of the street beyond the window somehow louder in the emptiness. Maybe an hour, maybe longer. Time was a thing I wasn't keeping track of anymore. When I finally pushed myself upright, my limbs felt heavy, as if the night's grief had soaked into my bones. I slipped on the same hoodie from the day before, the one with the frayed cuffs and the faded logo barely visible, and padded to the kitchen, hoping, maybe foolishly, that something would be waiting for me. The room was empty, still smelling faintly of rain and dust. The scent of Luna's fur lingered faintly in the air, a ghost of warmth I wasn't ready to let go of. I poured a cup of coffee, the bitter liquid a poor substitute for the way she used to nudge my hand with her head, demanding attention before breakfast. The house felt hollow, like a shell left behind by a creature long gone. I found myself opening the back door and stepping outside, half expecting her to be waiting somewhere in the garden, her pale calico fur blending with the last few autumn leaves clinging to the hedges. But there was nothing. Only the dull rustle of wind through the trees and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I sank down onto the step, the wood rough and cool beneath my fingers, and closed my eyes. In the quiet, my mind drifted to Nate. What was he doing? Was he safe? Did he think about me as I thought about him, constantly, like a heartbeat I couldn't quite hold? I thought about the last time I saw him, the way his eyes had flickered with something unreadable, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. I thought about the silence he left behind, a weight that had settled on my chest and refused to lift. I thought about Luna, and how she'd come into my life just after he left, like a fragile thread holding me together when everything else was falling apart. The day stretched on, slow and heavy. But then, as the afternoon light shifted to a softer, more forgiving hue, I noticed something strange. The front door creaked open. Luna. She was back. Not running in with the usual burst of energy, no quick rub against my leg or loud meow demanding food. She slipped inside quietly, her pale green eyes wide and wary. Her scarred shoulder dipped low like she was carrying something unseen. I crouched down slowly, not wanting to scare her. The smell of rain clung to her fur, and there was a faint tang of something earthier. Damp leaves, maybe, or the faint scent of dirt. She paused in the hallway, then blinked slowly at me, the way she always did when she trusted me. I reached out a tentative hand, and she brushed her head against my fingers. It was a small moment, but it felt like a lifeline. Over the next few days, Luna and I settled into a quiet rhythm. She was shy at first, retreating to the corners of the house during the day, hiding beneath the couch or tucked behind the old armchair in the living room. But at night, she would come find me, slipping silently into my room, curling up at the foot of the bed with a slow, contented purr. Her presence was a balm, a fragile comfort amid the ache of missing Nate. She had this way of pawing gently at my sleeve when I sat still for too long, as if reminding me I wasn't alone. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me with those strange, knowing eyes, like she was trying to understand something just beyond her reach. I started to notice the small details, the way her whiskers twitched when she was curious, the soft brush of her tail when she was content, the slow, deliberate blink that felt like a secret language between us. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the house filled with the golden light of dusk, Luna surprised me. I was sitting on the floor, staring at the old photo of Nate and me on the mantelpiece. Luna padded over quietly and settled beside me, her warm body pressed against my side. She reached out a soft paw and placed it gently on my chest. It was such a simple gesture, but it stopped me cold. The weight of everything, the loss, the silence, the fear, pressed down on me in that moment, and Luna's quiet touch was like a lifeline pulling me back from the edge. I closed my eyes and let myself breathe. There was a fragile hope growing in the quiet spaces between us, a tentative trust that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way through the darkness together. As the days passed, Luna's personality began to unfold like a slow bloom. She was stubborn and fiercely independent, with sudden bursts of energy that sent her darting through the house like a streak of lightning. But she was also strangely attentive, always watching, always alert, as if she was guarding some secret. I started to notice the patterns in her behavior, the way she would disappear for hours, only to reappear with a quiet urgency in her eyes. The way she would scratch at the same spot on the hallway wall, night after night, as if trying to dig through some invisible barrier. Sometimes, when I sat alone in the kitchen, I could hear her soft meows coming from the other room, a quiet conversation between two souls trying to make sense of loss. And slowly, I began to understand that Luna wasn't just a cat. She was a companion, a witness to my grief and my hope, a presence that held space for both my pain and my healing. The house felt less empty with her in it. The nights were less cold, the silence less unbearable. One rainy evening, as I sat by the window watching the drops race down the glass, Luna hopped up beside me and curled into a tight ball, her soft fur warm against my hand. I thought about Nate, about the way everything had changed in just one day, and I realized that Luna was the thread I needed to hold on to, the quiet promise that even in the darkest moments there is still connection, still life, still hope. It was the third night after Luna returned that I first noticed it. The way she sat, rigid and still, staring at the far end of the hallway. The house was quiet, save for the soft tick of the old clock on the wall and the hum of the heater struggling to warm the chill that had settled into the air. The low light of the table lamp cast long shadows, stretching and folding against the peeling wallpaper. Luna's eyes, those pale green orbs that always seemed to hold some secret, were locked on the wall. Not just the wall, but something beyond it. Something I couldn't see. I blinked, unsure if I was imagining it, but she didn't move. Her tail flicked once, sharply, and she crouched lower, her body tense. The soft pads of her paws pressed silently against the threadbare rug. I called her name softly, but she didn't respond. Not at first. Then, almost reluctantly, she lifted her head and glanced at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, like a mix of warning and pleading. Curious and unsettled, I got up and walked toward her, every creak of the wooden floor sounding too loud in the stillness. Luna backed away a little, then darted down the hall and disappeared into the dark doorway of the room Nate used to claim as his own. I hesitated, heart tightening. The door was cracked open, a sliver of darkness leaking out. I hadn't been in that room since the day he left. The smell of stale air and forgotten memories hit me like a wave. Inside, the faint outline of a desk, cluttered with scattered papers and an old lamp coated in dust. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet Luna stood at the threshold, fixated again on the far corner where an old framed photo hung crooked on the wall. She pawed at the wall, scratching quietly but insistently. The sharp scrape of her claws on the plaster echoed softly in the silent room. I crouched beside her, my own fingers trailing the cool, cracked surface of the wall. I could feel the uneven texture under my skin, like something had been worn away or hidden beneath the paint. I reached out, pressing my palm against the spot Luna kept scratching. There was a hollow sound beneath. My breath caught. I pulled back, heart pounding. Luna meowed softly, a small, plaintive sound, then brushed her head against my arm as if urging me to look closer. It was the first sign that something beneath the surface was waiting to be uncovered. Over the next few days, Luna's behavior grew stranger. She refused to enter Nate's room unless I was with her, and even then, she stayed close to the doorway, eyes darting nervously. At night, she would circle the hallway multiple times, stopping to paw at the same spot on the wall again and again. It was like she was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't yet understand what. I began to notice the patterns, the way Luna's ears would flatten when distant noises crept through the house, the muffled creak of the floorboards, the soft rustle of leaves pressed against the windows, the way she would sometimes stare out the front window for long stretches, her body tense as if waiting for something to arrive. And in those moments, I felt it too, a restless pulse beneath my skin, an unease I couldn't shake. The tension inside the house grew thicker, like a storm building behind closed doors. On one particularly gray afternoon, as the rain tapped steadily against the windows, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice was tight, brittle, like it had been stretched thin from too many sleepless nights. "Have you heard anything?" she asked, voice breaking. "The police. They're still searching. They said there's no sign, no leads." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "No," I whispered. "Nothing." We both sat in the silence that followed, the kind that presses down harder than any words could. After hanging up, I sat back on the couch and looked at Luna, who was perched on the windowsill, staring out into the gray blur of rain and sky. She meowed softly, then turned and padded toward the hallway. My heart tightened again. I followed her, hesitant, but compelled. She stopped at the familiar spot on the wall and scratched gently. Then, with a sudden, sharp movement, she dug deeper, scraping away flakes of peeling paint. That's when I saw it. A faint line, almost invisible under the layers of chipped white, traced the outline of a small door, a hidden panel in the wall. My breath caught in my throat. I knelt and ran my fingers along the edges. It was loose. The faint scent of old paper and dust wafted up. I glanced at Luna. Her eyes met mine, wide and serious, almost pleading. "Okay," I whispered, voice cracking. "Let's see what you're trying to show me." With a shaky hand, I pried open the panel. Inside was a small, narrow cavity, and tucked within it a folded bundle of old papers, yellowed with age and fragile to the touch. I pulled them out carefully. They were letters, handwritten, hurried, the ink faded but still legible. The first was addressed to Nate. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The words inside were cryptic, filled with urgency and fear. There was mention of secrets, of needing to leave, of dangers lurking close. And then a line that made my heart freeze. "Trust no one. If I disappear, know that I'm trying to protect you." I read and reread the letter, the weight of its meaning sinking deeper with every word. Luna brushed against my leg, a quiet reassurance amid the storm of confusion. The house seemed to breathe around me, holding its secrets close. But the hidden letter was just the beginning. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay awake, the letter folded beside me, the words swirling in my mind like a dark tide. Luna curled at my feet, her soft purring a fragile thread of comfort. But even in the quiet, there was a tension I couldn't ignore. The line between safety and danger had blurred, and in that blurring, a new question gnawed at me. What had Nate gotten himself into, and what was I about to uncover? The next morning brought a new kind of storm. My phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert. I barely registered the words before I froze, heart thundering in my chest. There, on the screen, was Nate, older, weary, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. The headline read, "Missing teen found after week-long search." My breath caught. I stared, disbelief and relief colliding in an impossible swirl. But then, my eyes flicked to the corner of the screen. There, in the background of the news clip, was Luna. My Luna. The same pale calico, her scarred shoulder visible even through the blurry footage. She wasn't missing. She had never left. And somehow, she had been with Nate all along. That night, Luna sat in Nate's old room with me again, but this time she seemed different, calmer, almost protective. I reached out and stroked her fur, still damp from the rain. Her eyes met mine, steady and sure. The mystery was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, there was a thread of hope. Something was happening beneath the surface, and Luna was at the center of it. The weight of the letter still pressed against my palm as I sat on the floor of Nate's old room, Luna curled beside me like a fragile promise. Outside, the world was thick with rain, each drop tapping against the window like a quiet drumbeat, slow and steady, the kind of sound that makes you feel time both dragging and speeding all at once. I could feel Luna's soft breath on my ankle, her small body rising and falling in rhythm with mine. The scar on her shoulder caught the pale light from the lamp, a pale crescent that looked more like a memory etched into her skin than a mark of pain. My eyes kept drifting to the hidden panel I had opened, the one that revealed the secret letters Nate had left behind. They were folded now, tucked carefully beside me, but their words echoed inside my chest like a storm I wasn't ready to face. I traced the rough outline of the panel with a trembling finger, then glanced at Luna. Her eyes caught mine, steady, expectant. I wondered if she knew more than she let on, if she was waiting for me to find the next piece of the puzzle. The room felt heavy, charged with a strange energy. The walls, the dusty floor, even the faint smell of old paper and rain seemed to be holding their breath. I swallowed hard. The first letter was full of cryptic warnings, of secrets Nate was running from, of dangers he couldn't name. I had no idea who he meant to protect me from, or why. But now, after seeing that news footage, the brief glimpse of Luna in the background, it was clear that whatever Nate had been involved in was still very much alive, still very much tangled with us. Luna stretched and yawned, then stood and padded quietly toward the corner of the room where a small, faded photograph hung crooked on the wall. She stared at it for a long moment, her tail flicking slowly. It was a picture of Nate, taken years ago, his bright smile frozen in time, the kind of smile that made you think everything would be okay. And then Luna did something I didn't expect. She leapt up and pawed gently at the frame. The glass cracked softly under her claws. My breath caught. For a second, the room seemed to shrink around us. I reached for the frame and pulled it down carefully. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly, the paper brittle and stained with time. It was a note, short, simple, but loaded with meaning. Find me where the river bends. Trust Luna. I read it over and over, the words sinking into me. A place, a direction, a promise. And Luna, silent, watching, waiting for me to understand. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and sharp with the scent of wet earth and pine. The kind of morning that makes you feel like the past and future are suspended somewhere in the mist. I packed a small bag, just water, my phone, and the folded notes, and headed toward the river Nate had mentioned. Luna followed close behind, her paws silent on the gravel as we made our way through the damp woods. The path was slippery with moss and fallen leaves, and the air was cool and crisp. Birds sang softly somewhere overhead, their calls bright against the quiet. Every so often, Luna would stop and stare, her ears twitching, her body stiff. She was alert, like a guardian moving through a landscape thick with unseen dangers. I kept my hand on her back, feeling the steady pulse of her small heart beneath my palm. After nearly an hour, we reached the river bend. The water was low, the surface glassy and still, reflecting the muted sky like a mirror. The world seemed to hold its breath. Luna jumped down from a fallen log and darted ahead, weaving through the reeds with sudden bursts of energy. She stopped at a narrow clearing, where the underbrush was tangled and thick. I knelt down and began to push aside the branches. At first, there was nothing. Then, something caught the corner of my eye. A small, weathered box, half buried in the dirt. I pulled it free, brushing off the mud. The latch was rusted but gave way with a soft click. Inside was a small notebook, its pages yellowed and crinkled. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably Nate's, messy, hurried, but clear. The words spilled out like a confession. He wrote about secrets he had uncovered, about people he feared, about things he couldn't explain but knew were dangerous. There were names, places, and dates, and at the end, a note scrawled in shaky letters. If you find this, know that I never stopped trying to protect you. Luna will guide you. Trust her. My fingers trembled. I looked at Luna, whose eyes were bright and unwavering. She rubbed against my hand, purring softly, a steady, grounding sound that somehow felt like hope. Back home, the house felt different. The air was thick with memories and unsaid things. I sat at the kitchen table, the notebook open in front of me, trying to piece together the fragments of Nate's story. The letters, the note, the notebook. They were all pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. But Luna was there, her small body nestled beside me, warm and steady. She looked up at me, and in that moment, I saw something mirrored in her gaze: fear and courage, loss and love. I realized then that Luna wasn't just a cat. She was a keeper of stories, a guardian of memories. She carried Nate's past on her scarred shoulder and now carried mine too. I reached out and stroked her fur, tears slipping down my cheeks. For so long, I had been running from the pain of losing Nate. But Luna's quiet presence was teaching me something new, that sometimes healing isn't about forgetting. It's about carrying the past with you and finding the courage to move forward anyway. The days that followed were a blur of whispered conversations with the police, long walks through the woods with Luna, and restless nights spent poring over Nate's notebook. Each page brought new revelations, secrets about the people Nate had trusted, warnings about the dangers that had chased him. But amid the fear and confusion, there was a thread of something else. A fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find the truth. And in that hope, I found a new kind of strength. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, I sat in the living room, Luna curled in my lap. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock. I looked down at her, tracing the delicate lines of her scar, and whispered a promise. "We'll find him," I said. Luna blinked slowly, a small, steady beat in the rhythm of my heart. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The days after the river bend felt like walking through fog, thick, damp, and persistent. The kind of fog that blurs the edges of everything, leaving the world indistinct and distant. It settled inside the house, curling around the corners and stretching into the spaces where Nate's absence lived loudest. Luna, usually so alert and restless, grew quieter. She found corners to nestle into, on the worn armchair by the window, in the little nook behind the couch, and sometimes curled in the crook of my arm when the evening shadows spilled long and low. I noticed how she breathed differently now, slower, less tense. The urgency that had marked her nights seemed to ebb, replaced by something softer. She was still cautious, but less wary. Like the weight she'd been carrying had lifted, even if just a little. The morning light came gentler now, filtered through the rain-speckled glass. I woke later than usual, to find Luna sitting patiently on the bedspread, her eyes half closed in quiet companionship. The ritual of waking up had changed. It wasn't abrupt or chaotic anymore. There was space for a deep breath, a soft stretch, a silent acknowledgement that we were here, together, in the aftermath. I ran my fingers through her fur and felt the rough edges of her scar beneath the pads of my fingers. It was a reminder of the days when things were raw, when the house trembled with loss and unanswered questions. But now, it felt like a bridge, connecting past pain with fragile hope. I moved through the house differently too. Where once every room held sharp memories, now there were pockets of peace. Nate's old desk remained untouched, but no longer oppressive. The scattered papers were gathered in a neat pile, the hidden notes and letters stored safely in a box beneath the bed. The walls felt less like barriers and more like a home holding its stories gently. Each evening, I sat with the notebook Nate left behind, piecing together the fragments of his hidden life. It wasn't easy. Some pages were cryptic, written in haste or fear. Others spilled out like confessions, pain, regret, and hope woven through the words. Reading his handwriting, I felt a strange closeness, like hearing his voice in the quiet spaces between the lines. It was a connection I hadn't dared to seek before. Luna's presence in these moments was like a quiet anchor. She would curl beside me, occasionally reaching out to tap my hand with her paw or nudge my shoulder with her head. There was a rhythm to these small gestures, each one a subtle promise that I wasn't alone. She was patient, a steady heartbeat in the stillness. And in those moments, I allowed myself to hope. The routines of daily life shifted in subtle ways. Mealtimes felt slower, less rushed. Mornings began with stretches of quiet reflection instead of frantic packing and leaving. I found myself lingering by the window, watching the rain-slicked streets, the way the light softened after a storm. Even Luna changed. She stopped hiding under the bed during thunderstorms and instead settled in the living room, close enough for comfort but calm enough to rest. But even with these small changes, the ache of Nate's absence was never far. It lived in the spaces between words, in the silence at the dinner table, in the weight of unanswered questions. The mystery of his disappearance and his return had shifted the ground beneath me, and yet it had also opened a door, one that I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside the old community center where Nate used to hang out. The place was faded and worn, but full of echoes. I remembered the last time I saw him there, the way his laugh had filled the room, the energy he carried. It felt like a lifetime ago. As I stood there, Luna weaving between my feet, I realized something. I'd been holding on to the past so tightly that I'd forgotten to live in the present, to find a way forward. That evening, I took Luna to the park, her favorite spot. The sky was a soft blue, the air warm with the promise of summer. She chased after leaves and fluttering insects, her movements light and free. I watched her, heart full and aching at once. In her small, fierce way, she was teaching me to trust again, to open myself to the unpredictable flow of life. Back home, I sat on the floor with Luna curled in my lap. The notebook was closed beside me. The letter from the hidden panel rested on top, worn but sacred. I stroked her fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breath. There was a stillness between us, quiet but alive. I realized then that Luna was more than a cat. She was a bridge, a keeper of secrets and stories, a silent witness to pain and healing. In the days that followed, I began to make small choices. I called old friends I'd lost touch with. I started painting again, something I'd abandoned when life grew too heavy. I began walking the river path regularly, letting the water and trees carry away some of the weight. And Luna was always with me, watchful, comforting, fierce. Sometimes, when the evening shadows stretched long and the house grew quiet, I'd find her sitting by the hidden panel in Nate's room. She would paw gently at the edges, then settle down, as if guarding the stories held within. I understood then that some mysteries would remain, that some questions might never be answered, but that didn't mean the story was over. One night, as I lay in bed with Luna curled at my side, I thought about how much had changed. The fear, the loss, the fragile hope. I thought about Nate, wherever he was, and the courage it must have taken to disappear and to try to protect us. I thought about Luna's scarred shoulder and the quiet strength it symbolized. And I thought about myself, how far I'd come and how much farther I still needed to go. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt possible. The house was quiet that morning. Early sun filtered through the cracked blinds, painting lines of soft gold across the floorboards. The smell of fresh rain lingered faintly in the air, a reminder of the night's storm. Luna lay stretched out in the middle of the living room, her scarred shoulder catching the light. She looked peaceful, almost serene. It was the kind of stillness that feels like a breath held, waiting to be released. I watched her for a long time, thinking about how much had changed, how much we had both survived. I thought about Nate, about the hidden letters, the notebook, and the secrets that had tangled us all in ways I still didn't fully understand. And then, Luna moved. She stood slowly and padded toward the back of the house, toward the room Nate had once called his sanctuary. The door was cracked open, a sliver of shadow beckoning. Curious, I followed. Inside, the air was cooler, tinged with the faint scent of cedar wood and old paper. Luna jumped up onto Nate's desk, her paws landing softly on the scattered papers and open notebooks. She sniffed something near the edge and began pawing at it gently. I leaned closer and saw a small, folded envelope, yellowed with age. It wasn't one of the letters I'd found before. This one was different. The handwriting was familiar, Nate's. But the ink was faded and the edges were worn like it had been hidden for a long time. I took the envelope carefully and unfolded the letter inside. To you, if you're reading this, it means I've finally found a way to be free from the things that haunted me. I never wanted to leave you with all the shadows. There is one last thing I want you to have. Something to remind you that love outlasts fear. Look where Luna first scratched the wall. There you'll find the answer you need. My heart raced. I looked over at Luna, who was now sitting by the door, her tail flicking slowly, eyes bright and alert. The wall she'd scratched all those nights. I hadn't dared to look there since we found the hidden panel. The scars of Luna's claws were faint but still visible. I knelt down and traced the marks with my fingers, the wood rough and warm beneath my touch. Slowly, my hand found a small notch in the corner, a hidden latch, almost invisible. I pressed it carefully. The wall shifted. A small panel swung open, revealing a tiny compartment carved into the wood. Inside was a small wooden box, simple and smooth. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of small objects, photographs, trinkets, and a faded cassette tape. I recognized the pictures immediately. Nate, smiling and alive, standing with people I didn't know. Faces that looked kind, but wary. Places that seemed familiar, but just out of reach. There was also a small worn key, its purpose a mystery, and then the cassette tape. I sat back, holding the box in my lap. Luna curled closer, nudging my hand with her head. The tape felt like a time capsule, a whisper from the past. I found an old cassette player in the attic and dusted it off, then pressed play. Nate's voice filled the room, rough and unpolished, but unmistakably his. He spoke slowly, like he was telling a story meant for me alone. If you're hearing this, I'm already gone, or maybe just beyond reach. I wanted to leave something that wasn't just pain or fear. This tape is my last gift, my way of saying I love you, even if I couldn't say it enough. There's a place, a little cabin by the river, where I found peace for a time. It's where I hid the rest of my secrets, the things that I never wanted to burden you with. If you want to find me, or at least find some answers, go there. And trust Luna. She's always been my guardian, and now she's yours. The tape clicked off, leaving the room heavy with silence. Luna looked up at me, her eyes steady, unblinking. I knew then that this journey wasn't over, but this final gift, a map hidden in memories and paw prints, was the key. The next day, I packed a bag. Luna followed, her small body alert and purposeful. We drove out of town, along the winding river roads Nate had described. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and earth. The cabin was nestled in a small clearing, just as the tape had said. Simple, weathered by time, but sturdy. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air smelled of cedar and old books. The walls were lined with shelves, covered in dusty notebooks and photographs. On the table lay a letter addressed to me. Welcome. If you're here, it means you're ready. This place is my sanctuary, my truth, and now yours. There's peace here, even in the midst of chaos. Take what you need and leave the rest. Love, Nate. I walked through the cabin slowly, touching the books and pictures. There were sketches of the river, notes about stars, and pages filled with poetry I'd never heard him write. It was a side of Nate I hadn't known, a man seeking light in dark places. Luna settled on the windowsill, watching the river bend just outside. That night, I lay in the cabin's narrow bed, with Luna curled beside me. The river's gentle murmur filled the quiet, a lullaby to the restless heart. I realized then that this place, this moment, was a gift. Not just from Nate, but from Luna, the bridge between past and present, loss and healing. In the days that followed, I stayed at the cabin. Each morning, I wrote in a journal Nate had left behind, trying to make sense of the tangled threads. Luna explored the woods, chasing shadows and scents, always returning to sit by my side. She was more than a cat. She was a companion, a guide, a keeper of the stories I was only just beginning to understand. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blushed with pink and gold, I found something beneath the floorboards, a small wooden box, lighter than I expected. Inside was a locket, delicate and worn. When I opened it, a photograph fell out. Nate and me, years ago, laughing in the sunshine. On the back, a note. For when you need to remember who you are. Tears filled my eyes. I held the locket close, feeling the warmth of his love, the weight of his absence, and the quiet hope of what might come next. Luna rubbed against my hand, purring softly, and I knew. This final gift wasn't just a key to the past. It was an invitation to keep moving forward, together. The river's slow current carried a quiet rhythm, steady, unhurried, carrying stories from one shore to the other. It was a reminder that life, no matter how tangled or broken, keeps flowing. Sometimes gently, sometimes in torrents, but always forward. In the cabin, nestled deep among the pines and wrapped in the soft breath of early morning, she sat, Luna. Her fur gleamed in the first light like the quiet promise of dawn, the scar on her shoulder softened by shadow and time. I watched her, and in her calm gaze, I saw all the stories she held, all the places she'd been, all the love and loss she carried with quiet dignity. It's strange how a cat can come to mean so much, how the rhythm of a tiny heartbeat beside yours can become the anchor when the world feels unmoored. For months now, since the riverbend night and the long search through shadows and secrets, Luna has been my compass, my silent companion through grief and healing. She's taught me patience, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the subtle, steady kind that waits in the quiet for light to break through. Sometimes, I wonder if she knows more than she lets on. Her insistence on certain corners of the house, the way she stares at nothing, or a memory I can't see. The scratches on the wall, the quiet presence beside the hidden panel. All these small, quiet acts that spoke louder than words. In her way, Luna was guiding me through mystery, through heartbreak, through the slow unveiling of truth. And what truth did I find? That love isn't neat or tidy. It doesn't always come wrapped in clarity or comfort. It's messy, uneven, and sometimes painfully elusive. But it is always there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for us to open our hands and hearts wide enough to hold it. I learned to trust again, not blindly or without scars, but with the wary hope of someone who has been broken and put back together, with a softer, deeper kind of strength. That comes from knowing loss, but choosing to live anyway, to keep seeking light in the places shadowed by absence. There is no simple closure here, no perfect ending, only the quiet acceptance that life unfolds in chapters, some filled with joy, others with sorrow. And sometimes, the chapters overlap, weaving a tapestry of memory and presence. Luna's scar reminds me of that, a mark left by the past, a wound that healed but never quite vanished, a sign that survival isn't about forgetting pain. It's about carrying it gently and learning to move with it, not against it. I still carry Nate's notebook, the hidden letters, the cassette tape, the locket, each a piece of a puzzle I may never fully solve. But that's okay, because the real story isn't just about finding answers. It's about living with the questions, about honoring the people we love by holding their memories close, letting them shape us without defining us. Luna curls in my lap now, her purring a soft vibration beneath my fingertips. I think about how strange it is that this cat, scarred and silent in so many ways, became the bridge to healing, to trust, to hope. She was never just a pet. She was a keeper of stories, a guardian of hearts. And I, too, have changed. I see the world differently now, more deeply, more patiently, more gratefully. I notice the little things, the way sunlight slips through leaves, the scent of rain on dry earth, the warmth of a cat's fur against skin. These small moments are the stitches that mend the fabric of loss. They remind me that even in absence, love remains. There is a beauty in second chances, in the quiet work of rebuilding, in the courage to step forward even when the path is unclear. The river keeps flowing, and so do we. Sometimes, when the house is still and the night holds its breath, I find myself thinking about Nate, about the choices he made, the fears he carried, and the love he left behind. I don't have all the answers. I probably never will. But I have enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to trust that healing, like the river, is a slow and steady current. Luna looks up at me now, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lamp. She blinks slowly, a cat's way of saying she trusts me, and I trust her too. Because in this strange, quiet story of loss and reunion, of scars and secrets, we have found something rare, a kind of home, not just a place, but a feeling, a tether, a promise. The sun dips below the horizon, casting the world in shades of amber and purple. I sit by the window, Luna perched beside me, watching the river twist through the valley like a silver ribbon, and I whisper to the quiet night, "We are here. We are alive. We are still learning how to love. And maybe that's all that matters."